All right, I just want to do a sound check with Russ, right? Can you hear us, Russ?
I got you now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I've got 5:59, 1 minute. Oh, I'm showing 6 o'clock then.
All right, it is 6 o'clock, it's October 22nd, 2024, and we are going to have a city council meeting of the Lake Stevens City Council. We're down at the mill and we are as well live on Zoom, and this will be recorded and later posted on our YouTube channel. With that, I would like to call the meeting to order and ask all to rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Daughtry,
Present.
Councilmember Peter Sagan,
Present.
Councilmember Donahue,
Present.
Councilmember Shipman. Present. Councilmember Jorstad. Present. Councilmember Ewing,
Present.
Councilmember Tajik.
Present.
All right, great. All are present. And Council President, can we get an approval of the agenda?
Yes, sir. We have an agenda before you. I would like to make one change, and that is taking the action item 12A and moving it under consent agenda. Anyone have an objection to that?
I would ask a question of the mayor. Is there anybody that has a green sheet that wants to talk about the RTO?
No.
So then I have no problem with that. I would approve, move to approve the agenda with that change.
Second. All those in favor of approving the agenda? Aye. Aye. Thank you. You have an agenda.
Thank you, President. All right, let's move forward to citizens' comments. We're going to go to citizens' comments. And just a reminder, there are 2 public hearings later on in the agenda. So if you wish to speak about items on the public hearing, then I would ask that you wait till then. If you have something other than those 2, then we would ask for you to speak under the citizens' comments arena. And just a reminder to all those present and online, the council listens to your comments, but they don't respond to your comments in this location, okay? So with that, let's go online. Do we have anybody online wishing to provide citizens' comments?
I don't see anybody. Again, as the mayor stated, if you'd like to speak to the council tonight under general comments, please raise your hand, digital hand, and I'll let you in. Nope.
Okay, then we'll go to the first. I have Gloria, is it Iverson? Eilertson? Yeah, Gloria, if you could go to the podium, state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes. Yeah. And then after her will be Brian C.
Okay, I'm from Craigmont, where the land proposal is going to be asked to purchase that land. I stand for the Craigmont community, which is a very strong community of 36 units.
Mayor, if I can mention, this is part of the public hearing.
What's that?
This is part of the public hearing.
That's okay, we'll let her go.
Okay.
Wanted to know if the land has been sold yet, and if we have a time frame of when we're supposed to be out of there, or if we can still have a voice in this matter.
Again, we won't respond to your questions in this format, but I will get back to you.
Okay, I'm counting on it, Brett. Thank you.
Let's do it. Okay. Brian. Yeah. Brian, can we get name and address for me, please?
Do I have to give my address?
If you want to say Lake Stevens, I'm okay with
All
that.
right, Lake
Yeah.
Stevens, Brian Clark, Lake Stevens. I'm here to talk about the retention pond issue. I know you guys had a meeting about it last week. I've been calling your guys' stormwater department for the last 4 years, trying to get the retention pond behind my house, which hasn't been maintained in 30 years, which is flooding my yard. It's damaged my retention wall. I've had to rebuild it. And I can't get a call back from anybody in this city to come and address the issue. And I'm a little bit fed up with it because I'm tired of fixing somebody else's issue.
Okay,
So I would really like somebody to I know you can't respond today, but I'm tired of calling and getting no response.
Brian, would you send me an email?
Sure.
Do it. Cool.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. And then the rest of the ones I have up here are for the public hearings. Is there anybody else who wishes to give just citizens' comments tonight? Okay, I'm seeing none and no one online still. Okay, with that, we'll move forward to council business, council president.
Yes, how about if we start with Councilmember Shipman?
I have nothing for tonight.
Nothing. Councilmember Georgetown?
Thank you. I had an opportunity today's Tuesday, last Thursday, to attend the Master Builders Affordable Housing Breakfast in Snohomish County. It was an opportunity to hear what master builders are doing in our community and are recommending to help increase middle housing for our communities. Housing that is not affordable housing in terms of how it's HUD defined, but more affordable than your regular market rate housing. It was great to listen to their recommendations and know that many of the things they're recommending are things that we're already doing in the city of Lake Stevens around zoning and around incentivizing ADUs and more density in our housing options. So I didn't learn a lot because we're kind of ahead of the curve in that sense. So that was great to hear. We also had a Snohomish County Cities dinner that same evening. It was a long day. Learned a lot about the problem of organized retail theft in Snohomish County. I was kind of blown away by the statistics and by what a massive problem it is and how retailers and security and law enforcement's hands are tied and the lack of resources. Talked a lot about the upcoming vote issue on the ballot, the public safety 0.2% sales tax and what that would pay for, how that might help kind of support efforts to address this problem. It was a good conversation, very good information. So I was glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ewing?
Thank you. So I attended the planning commission meeting on the 9th, which they were reviewing the comprehensive plan. I left there early to go to school board meeting, which I will just say it was a student recognition. And for anyone who hasn't had a chance to go to the student recognition meeting, they recognize students from each of the schools in the school district. So for me, I just felt optimistic for the future of our community in general, based on what I heard from the kids and what I heard from administrators, and just felt a sense of gratitude for our local leadership in the school district, trying to help the rising generation be the future leaders that they're going to be. And the harvest market, attended that as well. And that was a lot of people. Appreciate whoever ordered the beautiful weather. It was like 70 degrees and sunny. But it's great to see so many people in the community that are supporting our local vendors.
Great. Councilmember Tangent?
I went to a first responders dinner and had a general talk about the needs of our first responders after they've responded and going back to their families. Pretty interesting comments about our first responders and what's really going on for them mentally when they go through and see all the destruction and stuff and come back to their families and have a hard time coping with it. So it was a really interesting evening. Got a lot of insight there and saw a lot of money raised for first responders. Great evening. And then I just wanted to give a shout out to our public works department. I've been seeing you guys working on our roads, sweeping, keeping all those catch basins clean, especially among weather storm after weather storm after weather storm. And I've been seeing all the drains being cleaned out. So great job. I just saw a lot of people out there working lately.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Donahue?
Yes, I also attended the planning commission meeting on the 9th. That was a holdover from the meeting the week prior to allow for additional public comment. I'll kind of leave it at that because looking at the audience, I see a lot of the same faces and some new faces and expect another great presentation by Senior Planner Levitan tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Patry.
I went to the Snohomish County Cities retail theft thing with Councilmember Jorstad. It was very eye-opening. I was a little appalled at what's really going on in some of the cities, more so south of us or even west of us than it is affecting us, but I understand that we have the same problem. I also this morning attended the Snohomish County Committee for Improved Transportation, where we got a briefing from the Highway Patrol on their budget. And we also got a little bit of an update on the Highway 2 trestle issue, which there's a bunch of questions about, hey, we spent $25 million. What do we get? What do we got so far? So they're trying to talk about that. We haven't lost the sight of the trestle. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. A few of us attended the opening of the Regional Training Center today up in Arlington. That is a training center for police officers to become certified, I guess. I think it was Governor Inslee that indicated it doesn't happen very often, but trying to get police officers through the system and so forth has taken up 9-12 months to get them through the academy. They're down to about 30 days now because of there was a new training center in Pasco open. So government at work, it's nice to see, but the idea is get more police officers through the system so we can get them onto the streets and so forth. So that opened up in Arlington and hopefully great things will come of that. So thank you.
Yeah. I'll forego my comments as many of the events y'all were at, I was at, and don't want to rehash them, but good stuff going on. Let's go to City Department report, Public Works Department. Aaron.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. My name is Aaron Halverson. We have a large audience for a council meeting. My name is Aaron Halverson. I am the Public Works Director. There's a department report in your packet. I just wanted to address a few questions we've had over the previous, a few of our previous meetings with the council in this report. First, there was a question regarding the portion of the budget for roadway striping and thermoplastic. What portion has been used this year? Sort of how does it relate to previous years? So we went back and took a look at it. In 2013, there was 120,000 budgeted. We didn't use a lot of that funding last year, but this year we did. So if you're driving around the community, you'd see that we've updated 42 traffic arrows, 13 miles of lane lines and fog lines, 140 crosswalk bars, several rumble strips. And then our crews applied thermoplastic to 8 crosswalks, 2 stop bars, and 1 25-mile-per-hour roadway marking. So as you're driving around the community, you might see that. We were certainly a little more active in striping this year. Like I said, previous years, a year ago, we didn't do a lot of the work because we just didn't have the staff resources in place to handle that project. So comparing the two, it's kind of apples and oranges. This year we have the staff. We're going to do a lot more work. Does that answer your question? I think Councilmember Shipman, you were the one that asked me that question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Go on to the next question. The second question is, are there grants the city can pair with transportation benefit program funding? Now, the transportation benefit program is funded with a 0.2% sales tax that was voter approved. And that funding is used for pavement preservation and sidewalk projects, essentially pedestrian projects. So the question at a previous meeting was, is there state funding or federal funding or outside funding that could be paired with the local dollars to extend these projects? The answer is yes. So there's a matrix in your packet, and there are sort of 3 buckets of money, I'll call it. There's a transportation improvement board. It's a state run board or a state board, and they have 2 different pockets of money there. They have an active transportation program and an urban arterial program. Both fund several projects throughout the state. have about 90 million between the two, and average awards range from 350,000 to 2.1 million. That's a great thing to pair with this project with TBP funding. Second, we have WashDOT Safe Routes to Schools program, which we have used in the past to pair with projects on 91st. The recently completed project on 91st Avenue Southeast. I hope people are using it. I think people are using it. And they also have a pedestrian bicycle program that would be a good opportunity. And finally, there's Puget Sound Regional Council funding. It's called Transportation Alternatives Program. It's a great pot of money. It's federal funds. They really try to award more than $1 million per project, but you must be what's called a certified acceptance agency. Lake Stevens is not, but it's on our work plan in the future to become a certified acceptance agency. And what it means is WashDOT reviews our programs and agrees that we can handle federal funding without much oversight. We're going to get there. We have really professional staff, engineering staff, our city engineers to my left. We will get there. Does that answer that question? Certainly hope so. Okay, great. Finally, there's a question, and this will be fast. How many sewer manholes are in the city? Well, come to find out, there are 3,734. Let's call it 3,700 sewer manholes throughout the city. And we were talking about the impact the manholes have on pavement in the city. So as you're driving around the city, you might notice a clunk, 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 or as you sort of, we all do it. If you drive 20th Northeast and you go down Lundin Parkway, I drive it every day. We all weave. Do you weave? Yeah, we weave. And we weave to avoid the manholes, right? The manholes have settled or they're higher than the roadway. One of the things we've talked about doing is trying to find some sources of revenue for pavement preservation. This is part of it. Let's get these manholes level with the road surface for a variety of reasons. But one of the main reason is preserving pavement. They tend to crack around these raised manhole lids and create problems in the long run for pavement preservation. So again, there are 3,700 of them around the city. And I think that answers that question.
Aaron, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Who owns the infrastructure, including the manholes? The city or the sewer district?
The sewer district owns the infrastructure. We own the roadway. We maintain the roadway, we'll call it.
So is there not an obligation from the sewer district to maintain adequate elevations of manholes within our streets?
Yeah, generally speaking, there is an obligation, and it depends on what their tolerance for maintenance is. So if it's an inch above the pavement, might be okay with them. There's no violation necessarily, but it's problematic for our pavement preservation around it. The pavement condition that surrounds that manhole, which is not of interest to them, quite frankly. It's not important to them.
Excuse me, when we set the guideline for that?
We definitely could. The question is, do we have one? I don't think so. Yeah.
I guess I would just hope that we'd have more of a cooperative effort with the sewer district to facilitate this, because just driving around the city, there's a lot of manholes that are missing asphalt around the collars, and the detriment to the road system is exacerbated because of that. And I just hope we could come to some sort of agreement. I mean, we've had discussions with the sewer district, and they're allocating, I think, $10,000 a year, maybe.
Yeah.
Which covers what, 5 manholes?
Yeah, six manholes.
I-
Yeah, so I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I was going to say in your proposal, you're looking at 60 to 70 manholes
Yeah.
corrections for the
Yeah.
year. And I guess I would hope we could have more cooperation to get, a little more even keel with the sewer district on that obligations.
I concur. Okay, there was one last thing. The fourth, if we're done with the sewer manhole lid issue, the fourth issue was, what is the cost to fill the roundabout islands on Lundin Parkway with concrete? So replace the rocks we have in the islands around the roundabouts at Lundin Parkway. Ran the numbers. Kim reviewed them. Kim, our engineer, and the cost is actually pretty high. So each roundabout, the first roundabout, Lundin Soper Hill is $118,000, and the other roundabouts, Lundin Callow is $69,000 for a combined total of $188,000 to do that work. Councilmember Ewing, and I think you brought that question to us. So I suggest this, why don't we bring it back as a future capital improvement plan project and see where it lands?
So hopefully in the interim, we can do vegetation management within that, so it doesn't look like it's never been maintained.
Yeah.
And the question would be, how much does vegetation management cost? So we're doing an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah. That's
Anything
it.
else from Aaron or for Aaron?
I appreciate it.
I would agree with Kim. I would like a cost estimate on that.
Sure.
I do think it needs to be addressed one way or another, as weeds are growing up between the rocks and, it does look, as, Councilmember Ewing said, it does look unkept.
Yeah.
And, so I think that would be good information for us to look into.
Happy to provide that. Yeah.
Yep, that's a good one.
Okay.
I appreciate the thorough answers to the questions and this information. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great. Let's go. Can I get a motion to pass the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion to pass consent agenda and a second. Can I get is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, great. Let's move to a public hearing. And we will have a public hearing on the 2024 comprehensive plan and concurrent rezones. That's the subject of the hearing, and I'll open the public hearing and David, you have the floor. David and Russ.
This is Russ Wright, Community Development Director for the City of Lake Stevens. I'm going to do just a brief introduction and then hand it off to David. So as the council members know, and many members of the community, the city has to go through a comprehensive plan update every 10 years.
That was very brief.
It wasn't, yeah, it was a brief.
Are you closing the hearing, Mayor?
Russ, I think we lost you for a minute, but I think you're back.
Okay.
Apologize. Keep going.
No worries. So anyway, we've had a very robust public engagement process. And in the last 18 months, we have gone over every element of the comprehensive plan with the Planning Commission through pretty comprehensive reviews of goals, policies, and updates to primarily integrate some climate change goals, some equity goals, as well as the new growth targets for the city. So just wanted to start out with sort of the backstory that, yeah, we put a lot of significant work into this, done the public outreach, worked with our Planning Commission, and have done updates to the council. We've also had our plan reviewed by the Department of Commerce and the Puget Sound Regional Council and other state agencies who have provided comment up to this point that have been integrated. With that, I'll just say that David, as the project manager, has done a phenomenal job answering all of the questions from the different agencies and keeping this project on track. And he will be available to talk about the details of the project tonight. And so with that, I will hand it off to David to go through his presentation.
All right, great. Thanks, Russ. So David Levitan, Senior Planner. So just wanted to go briefly over the meeting agenda. So we are here obviously for the comprehensive plan update and concurrent rezones. So wanted to just provide a very brief background on that, just a kind of a high level summary of what was presented to the Planning Commission, discuss the public and agency comments that we've received throughout the process, talk a little bit about the Planning Commission public hearing as well as their recommendation and findings. One of the motions that was incorporated into the Planning Commission's recommendation had directed staff to look at some potential alternatives to some of the map amendments that were proposed, specifically to accommodate required multifamily residential housing over the next 20 years to meet the city's growth targets at household income levels at or below 80% of area median income. So we'll provide a quick summary of that. And then I did want to call out for both the city council and then members of the audience that there were several new attachments that were added today. We received one new public comment overnight last night, so that was added as attachment 9. Received an additional public comment from Rob Stanton with the Lake Stevens School District, providing a little bit more background on the impact fee methodology that was incorporated into their capital facilities plan. So that's attachment 10. And then the city has cleaned up and kind of fixed some internal inconsistencies between table 9.1, which is the 20-year capital facilities plan, table 9.2, which is the 6-year capital improvement program, and table 8.8, which is a list of transportation projects over the next 20 years. So those were included as attachments 11 through 13. Those were distributed by email to the city council, and then hard copies were also placed at the back of the room this evening. I'm not sure if there are any more, but I'm happy to speak to any of those. I also, just before I get into the presentation, did want to speak. We heard both at the Planning Commission as well as in some direct contact with staff that there were concerns that the city is planning on acquiring and potentially redeveloping several of the Hasco properties, specifically the Craigmont apartments here just south of City Hall, as well as the Glenwood apartments down near the Chapel Hill area. Did want to clarify just at the outset that that is not proposed as part of the comprehensive plan or the rezones associated with those. Basically, the majority of the proposed rezones are kind of housekeeping or administrative in nature. They're to provide zoning that's more consistent with the existing uses. So in the case of the Craigmont apartments or the Glenwood apartments, those are multifamily residential developments that currently have single family residential zoning. So as part of this, we wanted to clean up our zoning map and to get rid of existing non-conforming developments, basically provide zoning that was consistent with the existing development. The city is not acquiring any land. We do not have any development proposals. These are merely map amendments to better reflect existing development that's on the ground. We greatly value our partnership with HASCO, the Housing Authority of Snohomish County. That is not the city's purview to do anything related to those properties. So I did want to just try to allay initial concerns, as we know that there have been those raised in the community. And we always try to provide as much feedback and as much clear information as possible. So I did want to include that at the beginning. So just a little bit about comprehensive planning. I'm going to be really brief on this. So as Russ mentioned, we are required to do this periodic updates. The growth management directs us to go through this process every 10 years. This plan will cover the planning horizon over the next 20 years, so through the year 2044. So our plan needs to be consistent with the Growth Management Act, with Vision 2050, which is kind of the regional plan for the 4-county central Puget Sound region. And then the Snohomish County countywide planning policies needs to be reviewed and adopted by the City Council and then submitted to the Department of Commerce and Puget Sound Regional Council for their review and certification. So really what's driving this process and through the year 2044 is growth targets that were allocated to the city following a kind of an interagency coordinated effort run through Snohomish County Tomorrow. So through the year 2044, the city has been allocated a certain population, employment, and housing unit growth target. That's the right column. So basically it's, and this goes back, it's basically backdated to the year 2020. The city was projected to grow by about 9,600 people, about 3,200 jobs, about 4,900 housing units. Over the last 4 years, we have made significant stride towards achieving some of those growth targets. So we get credit for the growth that has occurred over the last 4 years. And so basically need to provide the zone capacity to accommodate projected population, housing, and employment growth over the next 20 years. So a lot of the focus has been on housing needs and specifically on housing needs for households at or below 80% of area median income. So in Snohomish County, the area median income for a family of 4 as of 2024 is about $150,000. And continues to go up as housing costs also go up. So really where the city's most demonstrated need is, as you can see in kind of the left portion of the chart, is slightly more than half of that is at or below 80% of area median income. And so basically the state has allocated different housing types to correspond with the different income levels. So if it's assumed within the central Puget Sound region that to meet the growth targets at or below 80% of area median income, that needs to be provided through multifamily residential development. So that's apartments or condominiums. There have been a number of comments about, hey, from the public, and I totally understand this, that the city has adopted infill housing regulations, that it's adopted updated accessory dwelling unit regulations. And we do plan on accommodating, some of our housing growth through that, but specifically for the 0 to 80% AMI, we cannot utilize the projected capacity for those types of housing, basically middle housing. So duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, accessory dwelling units, those don't count towards meeting our projected growth target for the lower income ranges. So we do need to show zone capacity specifically for multifamily residential housing. Just a very brief update on the process. So as Russ noted, this has been going on for about 18 months, kind of starting in the spring and summer of 2023. Kind of did our initial public engagement. Really, the Planning Commission has been amazing as far as spending meeting after meeting, reviewing draft narrative, draft text, graphics, and especially the goals and policies that have been incorporated into all of the individual elements. A public review draft of the plan was issued at the end of July, and that's really when a lot of the public comments started to come in. And so now we have moved past the work sessions, past all of the community engagement, and we are now at the public hearing stage. So just a little bit more about the document, which is included in Attachment 1, Exhibit B. So basically the comprehensive plan is divided into an introduction and then 9 elements or chapters. Those cover a variety of topics. So land use, housing, economic development, the environment, capital facilities, public services, are kind of the major ones. It does include the 6-year and the 20-year CIP, which are tables 9.1 and 9.2. And as noted before, the staff has prepared updated attachments 11 and 12 for those tables 9.1 and 9.2. So any motion to potentially approve the ordinance should reflect that in the motion language, basically to replace tables 9.1 and 9.2, as well as table 8.8, basically would supersede what was included in tonight's meeting packet. The appendices included in the plan are also adopted by reference. Those include things such as the Housing Action Plan, the Climate Sustainability Plan, which were adopted by City Council resolution in 2023. They also include a number of different technical documents and capital facilities plans from partner agencies and utility districts. So the Lake Stevens School District, the Snohomish School District, Lake Stevens Sewer District, Snohomish Regional Fire and Rescue. Basically, the city adopts their CFPs by ordinance because, as part of the ordinance, because we are not a full service city. So we rely on our partner agencies and districts to provide those services, which are then analyzed both within the capital facilities element and the utilities and public services element. So a lot of the feedback especially has been on potential map amendments, which again are geared towards meeting the city's projected housing and employment growth over the next 20 years. So the future land use map is basically, it's part of the comprehensive plan. It creates kind of general categories of residential, commercial, industrial, public, and semi-public. Basically, it's kind of at the 30,000 foot level. That's then implemented through the zoning map, which has more specific zoning districts. And so as part of this, we are proposing both land use map amendments that are through the comprehensive plan and then concurrent rezones. So basically amendments to the zoning map. And so that is included as attachment to Exhibit B is the zoning map amendments. The city did prepare what's called an ESR, a story map, basically an interactive map to try to show and provide additional context and narrative related to some of the zoning map amendments. To kind of those were broken up into kind of the more housekeeping amendments that I previously mentioned, such as the Craigmont apartments, as far as basically just establishing multifamily residential zoning that's more consistent with the existing use. And then there are a few zoning map amendments that have specifically been proposed to accommodate and to meet our growth targets, both for employment and for high density residential housing. So we have received a number of public comments, written comments, and then also I'll get a little bit more into the oral testimony that was provided at the Planning Commission. So public comments that were received through October 16th are included in attachment 4 of your packet tonight, and then agency comments are provided in attachment 5. The draft of the plan that's included in Ordinance 1188 does incorporate a number of those public and agency comments, as well as feedback from the Planning Commission and the City Council. What was shared with the Planning Commission was a track changes version that showed changes that had been made between the July 2024 issuance of the public review plan and then basically all of the changes that had been made. So that was what the Planning Commission reviewed. And now that they've recommended approval to the City Council, we've incorporated those track changes into a clean version of the plan, which is included in your packet tonight. Public noticing is required, obviously, for the comprehensive plan and the rezones. So again, that public review draft was issued at the end of July. Really, when we started to get a lot of the public comments was when we went through and did the required noticing for the proposed map amendments. Basically, those notices were required to go out to affected property owners as well as property owners within 300 feet of any proposed rezone or comprehensive plan map amendment. And so we have received a number of comments related to those and heard from a number of individuals at the October 2nd and October 9th Planning Commission hearing, and expect to hear from more of those tonight and welcome those comments. Did the required noticing of the Planning Commission and City Council public hearings, issued their SEPA threshold determination, basically a determination of non-significance, back on September 23rd. Did not receive any comments on that, and the appeal period on that ended yesterday, and we did not receive any SEPA appeals. So we are good on that side of things. And then the meeting packet for tonight's meeting was distributed last week. So just to give a very high level overview of the Planning Commission public hearing, which was open on October 2nd, staff gave a brief, not so brief presentation. And allowed the Planning Commission then took public comment. At the conclusion of that public comment, per staff's recommendation, the Planning Commission approved a motion to continue the public hearing until October 9th and to keep the public comment portion open. So that meeting was continued to a special meeting on October 9th. And in between that October 2nd and October 9th meeting, staff at the request of the Planning Commission developed basically a frequently asked questions document, which is included in attachment 6 of your packet tonight, specifically to address a lot of the concerns that we heard on October 2nd and in advance of that public hearing. So that addressed things like potential traffic impacts, perceived risks of displacement, some of the concerns that the city would be acquiring individual properties. So we tried to address and assuage some of those concerns, as well as concerns about how there would be adequate infrastructure to accommodate this projected growth. So again, that's included in attachment 6. At the conclusion of that October 9th meeting, the Planning Commission did make a recommendation to approve the plan the future land use map and the concurrent rezones. There were a couple items that were incorporated into their motion to recommend city council approval. The first was there had originally been a proposal for several properties kind of towards the western end of 20th Street Southeast. Whoa. That mine. Sure. So as part of the planning commission motion, one of those was to maintain the mixed use land use and zoning designations that currently exist for several parcels just west of Caballero on the south side of 20th Street Southeast. That had originally been proposed to be changed to multifamily residential, along with the properties further to the west at the very southwest corner of the city. There was some public comment on that and some discussion and deliberation with the planning commission. And so ultimately their recommendation was to maintain that existing mixed use land use and zoning designations. As part of their motion, they also requested that staff look at potential alternatives to accommodate some of the required multifamily residential zone capacity over the next 20 years, specifically to look at potential alternatives to some of the sites that have been proposed, including the very western edge of 20th Street Southeast, just before you get to the trestle. So staff did do some of that analysis and included that in the packet tonight, and I'll provide a little bit more detail on that shortly. So that is included in attachment 8. So the city did look at a number of different areas. So originally the city had looked at rezoning several of the existing manufactured home parks in the city. Basically, that was proposed originally to provide similarly kind of more of a housekeeping amendment to provide multifamily residential zoning that is consistent with the existing uses. Basically, manufactured home parks are not an outright permitted use in the city's single family residential zones. And the staff had originally proposed to change that to multifamily residential. As we got into our land capacity analysis and really analyzed the displacement risks of basically upzoning areas with a manufactured home park and looked at some of the requirements of House Bill 1220, we did want to make sure that we adequately addressed the displacement risks, and we felt that it would not be a wise decision to change that because it would significantly increase the risk of displacement for some of our lower income households and residents. So that was not considered. Option 2 would rezone a couple areas just east of the Glenwood Apartments. Again, that has an existing supply of middle housing. And when you look at some of the census tract numbers, the income levels are lower than the city overall. So it kind of provides a supply of naturally occurring affordable housing. So we didn't want to upzone that area and potentially result in redevelopment that could displace existing residents. Options 3 and 4 were a couple of smaller areas that would just result in small increases. And so those would need to be combined with other areas to make up for any lost capacity, specifically from that western edge of 20th Street Southeast. Staff also looked at a number of other areas and basically that were encumbered by critical areas or didn't have adequate access, and so kind of dismissed some of those. We also received a specific request from a property owner on the north side of 20th Street Southeast. Would have basically been a site-specific spot rezone, and staff didn't believe that that was appropriate given its location kind of in a sea of single-family residential zone properties. And so we are not proposing to include that land use map amendment or that rezone. I would note that if during the deliberations, if council would like to look at any of these alternatives, staff would need to update the SEPA checklist as well as the land capacity analysis. And also, if the areas haven't been previously noticed, which they wouldn't have been, would need to do that noticing for the proposed map amendments. So the public hearing would need to be continued to accommodate that schedule. So I touched on them briefly before, the attachments 9 through 13. So attachment 9 includes comments from a property owner requesting to remove rezone RC1, which would rezone a current R4 zoned area to multifamily residential at the western edge of 20th Street Southeast, just before the trestle. Attachment 10 includes some comments from the Lake Stevens School District, basically just talking a little bit about their CFP and the impact fee methodology. I think there had been a question from a specific council member just asking why there were differences and why the methodologies were different. It's largely because the housing supply and the projected housing supply over the next 20 years differs between the two school districts. And so that's reflected in their impact fee methodology. Staff believes that both school districts have complied with state law as far as documenting their methodology. And then attachments 11 through 13 are the aforementioned updated versions of the 6-year and 20-year CIPs, as well as the transportation improvement project list. And so those would be proposed to replace what was included in the original packet. So I promise we're almost done. So the comprehensive plan and concurrent rezones are type 6 land use applications. So they require public hearings before both the planning commission and the city council, with the planning commission tasked with forwarding a recommendation to the city council. Planning commission did hold their public hearing and made findings as part of their recommendation. And both the staff report and ordinances 1188 and 1189 note those findings and that the approval criteria have been met. And so with that, following the staff presentation, there will be an opportunity for additional public comment. Following that, the city council is asked to discuss and deliberate on the proposal. And if ready, potentially adopt and approve 2 motions. The first, which is to adopt ordinance 1188, which would approve the comprehensive plan and future land use map. And then a second motion to adopt an ordinance 1189, which would approve the 2024 concurrent rezones and amend the city's official zoning map. And then if approved, both would be sent on to Commerce and PSRC for final review and certification. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions either before or after the public comment portion.
Okay, do we have any questions for David?
David, what's the drop dead date on having the comprehensive plan go through the council? Approved or not approved?
We probably would want to do it by late November just to have adequate time for especially given the holidays, for PSRC and to Commerce to kind of give it their formal blessing. They don't have a specific timeline. They both have reviewed the plan and provided their initial comments. So I don't think it'll be an extended period for them to certify the plan.
Thank you.
Other questions for David?
David, I noticed on your agency comments, you hadn't received any comments from PUD. Is there a reason for that?
I don't know if there's a reason for that. It was sent to PUD, both to the water and the electricity divisions. So we did not receive any comments from PUD.
So we're assuming there's adequate capacity to facilitate this new population projection.
Correct. And we were required to basically incorporate their analysis, and as part of Chapter 7, so public services and utilities, we are required to assess the concurrency between future infrastructure and projected growth. And we did make the determination through the plan and also through the SEPA checklist that there is adequate infrastructure capacity over the next 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Steve? Yeah, question for you. We received some attachment 9. I have a question of the zoning being changed from single family residential to multifamily residential. So approximately how many more units will be accommodated in that area? The second question follow-up is, what is the height limitation for that area? Because that was a question that was asked in the comment, and I'm not familiar with the height limitations there.
Yeah, so let me pull the numbers. It was somewhere in the 200 unit region because that was what we were analyzing in the alternatives. Let me pull the exact number. Yeah, so it was about 208 multifamily residential units was the proposed increase in multifamily residential capacity. And so, and that basically we had designed the proposed rezones to get us kind of to the bare minimum of our growth targets, not kind of zoom by them, but basically be consistent with those. So if we were to remove that area, we would need to find approximately 200 units of multifamily residential capacity elsewhere in the city. And that's what the map alternatives analysis had basically tried to seek and tried to analyze. And then as far as the maximum height within MFR, and Russ can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's 45 feet there.
Slight correction, 55.
55 feet? Okay. I know it's 45 feet for some of our mixed use zones, so 55 feet.
And where is the closest sewer there? Other as Cavalier Ridge is the closest sewer to that area there.
Yeah, I would have to pull up the Zura mapper. Are you? Sure. Yeah, we can look at that.
In a general answer, sewer is located up the hill from there. So that would be part of the 20-year growth that we would be looking at to have sewer utility brought into that area to make the redevelopment feasible.
Thank you. And so with the current zoning there with the R4, how many units there? And I guess with them being built, they could have it attached and a detached ADU. How many units would be there with the current zoning based on the available land that's there right now?
I would need to pull up the land capacity analysis because we did look at that specific area. I can pull that up. Let me stop sharing this. We're not sharing the screen. If you don't mind, if I can maybe try to pull that up in the LCA.
Yeah, you can pull it up and we can don't delay the meeting for that, but I would like to know that.
I do a couple questions, but I see David searching frantically, so I don't want to interrupt him here.
I may be able to field your questions while he's working on that, if you'd like.
Okay, so I've had the benefit of sitting in on the planning commission meetings and hearing some of the comments and questions that have been asked. And so there's one line here, looking at attachment 6, it's page 619 of the packet. And there's a line here that I have a couple questions related to that I think will both help confirm my understanding of this whole process and kind of why some of this rezoning is happening, but also, just kind of where it's coming from. And it's the sentence right above the last section of bullets down at the bottom of the page. And the line is, cities are required to provide sufficient areas for housing and employment needs through the year 2044. And so my first question would just be the housing and employment needs. How are those set or determined? Like where is that need being established and coming from?
Yeah, so those are,
So-
yeah, so go ahead,
Go ahead,
Russ.
David.
No, go ahead. I'll let you take that one while I continue to search.
I would just say there are a bunch of nested decisions that lead to that. So it starts with the Growth Management Act, then it goes down through obviously the Department of Commerce standards to the Puget Sound Regional Council through Vision 2050, which trickles down to the multi-county planning policies. And as part of the multi-county planning policies, we've received the gross Office of Financial Management sort of census forecasts for population growth, which is in Washington, needs over 1 million housing units. In the Puget Sound, specifically Snohomish, King counties, that's another 1 million people. So from there, it gets distilled through Snohomish County tomorrow which is all of the planning agencies in the county. that look at the current growth boundaries of each city, rural areas, urban areas within counties, to then create the distribution of both job growth and population growth. So again, it's a bunch of nested decisions starting at the state level, working down through the region to the county, then to the cities to adopt those into their plans. Did that answer your question and make sense?
Yes, that was perfect. So just to recap, I heard there's decisions at the state, regional, and county level that are effectively determining what we as a city have to accommodate as far as our housing and employment numbers, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then the first part of that sentence says cities are required. So either David or Russ, what exactly is that requirement? I guess what is the mechanism there that forces compliance with these numbers that have been determined by these other outside forces or entities?
So the requirement comes from the Growth Management Act that we have to plan for these targets. So it doesn't obligate us to meet these targets, but we have to go through our land use element, our forecast, our transportation plan, all of these, and just show that we have zoned capacity. And by complying with the Growth Management Act and other sort of state statutes, then the city remains compliant for different grant fundings. And as you heard about earlier from Director Halverson, it would be one of those steps that we're a compliant city, that we can show we can take care of our own projects. And so it just puts us in a sound standing with the state when we have fully compliant plans.
Okay, thank you. And Greg, I don't know if you need to, if you want to jump in on this, but say we were to just kind of flout this and say we're not going to plan for that. What, I guess, aside from just being ineligible for grant funding, are there any other consequences that might come from that?
Yeah, the big stick, of course, is that if we don't comply with our responsibilities under the Growth Management Act, we're not eligible not only for grant funding, but all types of state and federal loans and dollars. And you're kind of between the rock and the hard place. It's not that I have not seen yet a stick where the state has taken an agency or a public entity to court to try to compel them. The stick has always been hard enough that you really have no choice.
Okay, thank you.
Because it won't be able to functionally operate.
Okay, and that's, that was my understanding as well, but I just wanted to walk through that and confirm that so that everyone here knows, the staff, David, and all the work he's done, it's really trying to make the best of what's been forced upon us as a city. And that's kind of where all this is coming from. So hopefully that kind of addressed it at a high level, but I know there'll be some comments later and we'll try to get back to you with any remaining questions. So thank you.
And if I could just circle back on Councilmember Ewing's question. So we had estimated about 15 net acres on those properties. And with the R4, we had been very conservative and estimated about 4 units per acre. So that would be about 60 single-family residential units. I would note that that was deliberately conservative because we had such a projected surplus of single-family residential capacity. We didn't need to be aggressive with our development assumptions there. So it likely would be higher if somebody were trying to do highest and best use there. Duplexes are also allowed on any lot now that allows for a single-family residence. So could basically double the zone capacity there, and then also would allow for up to 2 ADUs. So it's hard to say. It could be kind of 60 at the bottom all the way up to maybe closer to about 150, depending on what type of housing they wanted to build there. Thank you.
Well, David, I was under the impression that on a single family resident, because of the legislation that not only did we have to allow duplexes, but all the way up to fourplexes.
So we are required to allow to have zoning that allows for that, but the city is allowed to require larger lot sizes for triplexes and fourplexes, which we do through our infill housing ordinance in chapter 1446. So in the city, whereas if you have, say, an R4 lot that requires a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet for a single family home, a duplex can be built on that same 8,000 square foot lot. A triplex requires 150% of that, so would require a 12,000 square foot lot. And a fourplex would require 175% of that, so a 14,000 square foot lot. So we're required to allow them in all of our zoning districts, but unlike a duplex, they don't have to be allowed on the same size lot as a single family home.
All right, thank you for the verification.
Any other comments for David? All right, great. Let's open up the floor then for public comments from the audience. So we are just going to talk. We have 2 public hearings. Remember, we're just talking about this subject only on this public hearing. And I'm going to go through my green sheets here. And I think Tom Dodd already left. So we'll go to the next one. How about Liz Davy? Liz, how are you today? All right, let's hit the podium. And we'll have 3 minutes.
I'll be short. Liz Davies, Lake Stevens. I'm not going to give my full address. The concerns and the issues that we brought up last time in October 2nd, we talked about transparency, and they did a better job in this map than they did beforehand. So thank you very much. I just think if we look at this, I think the infrastructure we're at capacity now. And I'm looking at the roads. I live off of Highway 9. It is a zoo. It's a madhouse. And infrastructure is a huge concern for all of us. I think of sewage. I think of PV. I think of everything regarding that. I also look at this going, okay, if we do the extreme, I'm thinking of Woodville. I'm thinking of Kirkland. I'm thinking of all the development that I'm seeing right now in my commute alone, in a 3-hour commute a day. I just think that we need to look at this and go, are we going to be aggressive, or are we going to look at this and go realistically? I get that there is a government. I get that it's kind of a catch-22 that you have to have a government hand in hand for funding. I understand that. However, when you look at that, we need to look at the people and what's impacted. And I think that's what's really important is how is this going to impact people's homes? I was afraid that my home was going to be taken away and that I was on that chopping block. So I just think we need to really realistically, in a human sense, we must look at that and say, how is this really going to impact overall? And I just am very concerned about the infrastructure and the traffic. Huge concern. It is a nightmare now. It's going to get worse if we put how many? Housing. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Next up, Kevin Quigley.
Mr. Mayor, Dr. Quigley, Suzanne Quigley.
Let's do it. That sounds great. Suzanne.
Hello, Suzanne Quigley, Springbrook Road, Lake Stevens. I'd like to bring your attention to your attachment 4, the final public comments, because there are some pictures in there that I'm going to be referencing on page 27. And these comments I provided to the Planning Commission as well. Kevin and I own a piece of property in the industrial area. And on page 27, you'll see a picture of that area and a yellow rectangle that represents the property that we own. And as we were digging into the comprehensive plan, we noticed that some of the maps that were created by McKinsey with data provided by the city and the county, that our property is being designated incorrectly. And this has been kind of a sticky issue for us because we have seen it be incorrectly designated on quite a few maps through different processes. And we're concerned that you're getting inaccurate information, which will make it very difficult to make good decisions about justifiably what precious areas absolutely need to be protected because they're by law needing to be protected, what areas should be protected because they're precious on their own, and what areas can be developed in this process. If you look at the next page, on page 28, you will see this greenish amoeba looking area that overlays our whole entire property represented by the yellow rectangle. And that greenish hatch is designated as wetland. Well, that land that we have in that rectangle is a historic farm. It's a very beautiful piece of property. And yes, Catherine Creek runs through it. There is definitely places that absolutely needs to be protected by law and should be protected because it's beautiful. But there's also a huge section of the property that we have gotten permits for rehabbing the building there. It is not wetland. And in the packet on a successive page, you'll see all our permits. We have been restoring the building there and at the same time planting native growth to protect and preserve the areas that are by law and by beauty should be protected. On page 29, you'll see another error that is noted where the blue solid areas show lots that have septic, and our rectangle isn't blue, but we have septic. So I raise this because I'm concerned that these inaccuracies will make it difficult for you as a council to make good decisions about what needs to be preserved, what needs to be protected, and what can be developed. And our experience is we keep on trying to bring this to the attention of staff, and we talk to the planning commission as well, and they never get corrected. And I just like to.
If you could, you're at the 3 minutes, just wrap up for me.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
On page 31, I'll show you an example of back in 2023, May 23rd hearing on a sub-area plan. The pink circle is showing, again, wetland for our whole property. And our rectangle is within that area, and it is not all wetland. So I know this work is hard and complicated, and you need accurate maps. And so I'd please like you to acknowledge and direct staff to correct these maps so that moving on, we don't have these issues of inaccurate information. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. And then I have Brian Seek. Oh, you wanted to go afterwards? Okay.
I can go in.
No, let's go ahead. Let's do it. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Quigley for very persuasive comments. I'd also like to thank the council more than once. You've been kind of the lifeline for me. And my comments are referenced in your attachment form on page 33. But I think I can make this kind of different because I have realized I am thoroughly unpersuasive. So I want to spend my 3 minutes talking about my personal failings. First, as a lawyer, I want my money back from NYU and I want my money back from Harvard because I've been totally unable to be persuasive to the city first about this fake wetland, but also look at the attachment that I included. This is from the industrial development rezone proposal. You can see multiple different colors, different rights based on which zone you're in. And for a year and a half since the date of this meeting, I have tried to understand from the city what do these zones mean, and the city has refused to disclose that. Now, admittedly, again, failed lawyer, because I look at that and I go, that must violate 5 different acts. The state spent money to, or the city spent money to do this. These things should be disclosed. I would like to ask you to disclose them. Secondly, I'd like to talk to you about my failings as a real estate developer. You see this proposal here. This was option 1. There were 3 options put to you for the industrial zone. All of them closed Hartford Road. I think I might have been the only person who commented, and I just said, please just give me one that doesn't close Hartford Road. But all 3 closed Hartford Road. Now I'm in a jam. I got 5 lots there. I had to sell it to the city. I lost literally 30 grand because if you close Hartford Road, that property is worth nothing. So I come before you as a failed lawyer and a failed real estate agent. Now I want to tell you my biggest failings, and it's as a social worker. My last job, I ran the Department of Social and Health Services. Big job, 17,000 employees, the government's biggest, state government's biggest agency, $17 billion budget. But it made me kind of fully invested in kids and the poor. And so I'm going to ask you this. please cruise my street, 27th Place Northeast. You just go down to the weed shop. There's only one way you can turn. You turn, it's only 1 block long. And I want you to think about the kids who live on my street, because I think this is why the city's so grumpy with me. Their safe walking has been blocked. There's no way for those kids to walk to either the stores down there or the stores here. And it's in complete violation of your code. Obviously, that didn't put me in very good stead. But the other thing is, for those same kids, we can't expand marijuana distribution without at least disclosing to them that's what we're gonna do. And nobody knows the plan now, because I've been working.
Mayor, we're at 3 minutes, just to let you
And
know.
I still haven't been sold. Cool. So I would like you, just one last time, to please cruise that one street and see for yourself. 27th Place Northeast, it's only 1 block long. See it on the way home. You'll see our farm and wonder how there can be a wetland there. But also think about the kids and live in that neighborhood, and think if we shouldn't take better care of this street, and think if we should be expanding marijuana before we disclose to them that's our plan. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Bill.
Thanks, Kevin. Let's go with Bryce Seek.
Hi, my name is Bryce Seek. I live on 203 171st Avenue Southeast and the southwest corner of Lake Stevens. Wife and I have lived there for 25 years. Other neighbors have been there since the early 80s. We moved there as a single family residence. We were in the county at the time. We knew we were in the growth management area. Other residents have been there since before the growth management area took effect. So they're talking about rezoning this area from R4 to multifamily residence, which includes 4-story apartment buildings. We just don't feel it's a proper use of the property. We've been, we live on the property. We're building our retirement home there this year. We're in the middle of it. We were planning on always being single family residents. I went to an October meeting last year. There was no indication that this would ever become multifamily residence. It was going to go to an R6. The February meeting also, it was going to be an R6. I don't know when it became a multifamily residence area. It was quite a shock when we saw the signs go up and see that it is now proposed to be a multifamily. Now here he's talking about 200 units going in there. I'm not exactly sure where they would put them. If I don't move, you're losing 1.25 acres there that I own that you can't build on. Many of the neighbors have other properties that they probably won't be moving either for many, many, many years. There is no infrastructure. There's no sewer. There's no water. We get water from the city of Everett still. I don't know what the proposal is for the infrastructure to improve. We waited 25 years for sewer to come in. We're putting septic system in now for our new home still. And I'm just not sure where this is going to go. We just don't care to have the multifamily high-rise apartment buildings right next door to us. Looking down at our single family residences. Anyway, I'd like you to reconsider. I sent a lengthy email to the city. I hope you all have an opportunity to read it. Steve has read it, and we talked about this earlier. So anyway, I just want you to take that into consideration before looking at the overall, as you're looking at the overall rezone. Thank you. I'd like to thank my neighbors for showing up today. So they're all we're all in this together.
Great. Thank you, Bryce. Appreciate it. And then I have, not quite sure, is it Danielle Carter? Quarter? Is it Daniel? It's Daniel, right?
Well, Peter. I signed the paper.
Okay.
I got work, so here I am.
All right.
Okay, my time started.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I'm here talking on behalf of my parents, John and Kristen Quarter. My name is Peter Quarter. I live at 8005 South Lake Stevens Road. We hope to have our property on 9113 20th Street Southeast added to the new plan with MFR zoning. It seems our property being nearly an acre of vacant land would be useful to increase MFR housing options. At October 9th meeting, Planning Commission members asked for employees to find suitable properties. We think R is a match for apartment or townhouse development. In particular, our vision proposes protecting the adjacent neighborhoods, accessing current bus route, and utilizing existing utilities, protecting adjacent neighborhoods. For neighborhood northeast of the 20th Street Southeast and 91st Avenue Southeast, is active with families. We prefer not to add more cars through that access to the proposed development. We will be limiting to a one-way traffic income for westbound 20th Street Southeast. For ingress, egress would be onto the 91st on the 91st. Aligned with the 19th Place Southeast. We have an example of our like-sized properties and the design and flow. Access current bus routes, current bus stops exist both at the corner of the 20th and the 91st, and at the northwest corner of the property and the 91st. This bus access aligns with the city's promotion of public transportation, utilizing existing utilities. Utility services are currently available on site. Water, sewer, gas, electronic services, and are already either running through or available to this property. 2 fire hydrants are accessible, and one on the west 91st and the other on the 19th Place. Consider the above advantages and the need for the city to increase housing units. We request consideration instead of denial, consideration for upcoming M, F, and R. I yield my time back. That's remaining.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
And that is all I have for that public hearing. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close public comments.
Mayor, can I ask about online?
Yes,
Okay.
please do.
There's a few people online. So if you would like to speak to the council during our public hearing for the 2024 comprehensive plan and concurrent rezones, and you are online, if you can raise your digital hand, we'll let you into the meeting. And if you're on a phone, hit *9 to raise your hand. Nope.
Nobody? I'm going to open the floor just for one more shot. Anybody who didn't do a green sheet that wants to talk about this subject. Is there anybody else who wants to add anything more to the public hearing? All right. Cool. So with that, we'll go ahead and close public comments on this portion of the hearing. And Dave, any further comments, or Russ?
I don't have any specific at this point. I'm happy to answer any questions based on public comments that the council has.
Okay, any further comments from Russ?
Not at this time. I am available for questions as well.
Okay, and then questions from council.
I have a question. We've heard feedback around the comprehensive plan proposal to increase the opportunity for multifamily housing. And I'm wondering if there's been any, given our city and the lack of buildable land that we have in our city and the requirements that we increase opportunities for multifamily housing, has there been any work since getting these comments, just looking at other alternatives, or I think I know the answer. We don't have any other chunks of land anywhere in our city that we can look at rezoning and still meet our goals. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's generally accurate. So the first step in when we kind of analyzed the alternatives was to see if maybe we just hadn't calculated right the existing capacity that we had. So look back at the buildable lands report, look back at our housing needs analysis that was done as part of the housing action plan that was adopted back last spring of 2023. So looked at that first and then, didn't find any additional capacity there. So then we started looking at alternative locations. And really what it came down to is we're trying to balance really kind of the comprehensive plan map amendment criteria, which kind of discourages kind of these spot rezones and rezone criteria that you shouldn't really be creating kind of these individual parcels. And so that for the quarters property, that was kind of really what went into that, is that if we were to look at that area, we probably would need to look at a larger portion just to provide more consistent zoning there on the north side of 20th Street. And then that would require additional noticing if we wanted to go that route, an analysis of infrastructure, which they spoke, which the gentleman spoke to as part of his public comments. And then having to balance that with a lot of the areas that we had originally identified are some of, when you look at the census tract data, especially, are some of the lower income levels. And then we are specifically required to address displacement and racially disparate impacts, risks related to land use decisions, including land use and zoning map amendments. And so that factored into kind of us taking a few of the initial proposals off the table because of those concerns. And so it's a very delicate balancing act. We are a largely built out community. There's not a whole lot of zone capacity. We have our sub areas, but we also have significant employment needs over the next 20 years. And so we can't just basically assume that that's all going to develop as multifamily residential. It can, but then we would have to discount our employment capacity from that. So we're having to kind of, basically there's a couple balls in the air that we're needing to juggle. We have directed a lot of our growth over the last 10 years, especially with the adoption of the 3 sub areas into those sub areas, 20th Street, Lake Stevens Center, and downtown. And have seen a lot of residential development along 20th Street, not as much in the other ones, the other two sub areas, but we have assumed additional residential capacity within those areas, and we still needed to find additional capacity in other areas.
Thank you.
So David, is kind of a quick, perfect piggyback on that planning commission favorite. Could you quickly recap where we're at on examining the UGA boundary and expanding that to increase our inventory of buildable land?
Yeah, so UGA expansions are considered as part of the county's comprehensive plan update. You actually are required to docket your UGA requests about 4 years in advance. So this is actually, I started in summer of 2020. It was actually one of the first things that I worked on getting ready. That was summer of 2020, getting ready for the 2024 periodic update for the county, because that's when the county considers UGA amendments. We submitted 4 proposals. A couple of those are focused primarily on employment, but 2 of them were also primarily for residential development. Thought that we had provided an analysis that met the criteria for UGA expansion. The county staff did not agree, did not recommend any of them. A couple minor, there were some county councilor initiated amendments that are being considered in the alternatives by the county on a much more limited scale, say off of Sunnyside and off of SR9, just south of the city boundaries, that would add a little bit of employment and residential capacity, but nothing similar to what the city had originally proposed. So we had gone the UGA expansion route and proposed that, and thought that we had kind of made our case for that, and none of those were recommended for approval, and largely were not even analyzed in the county EIS.
Okay, thank you. And so if I could crudely summarize that at a high level, we can't build out, so our only option is to find places to build up. Is that correct?
It is, and that's largely in line with the regional growth strategy and Envision 2050, as well as, that you look at the growth targets that have been assigned to Lake Stevens, which has a comparable population to both Linwood and Edmonds, and both of those cities have been allocated about twice as many residential units because the growth concept focuses most growth along high capacity transit, along light rail, along I-5. So that's been factored in regionally when you look at the 4-county region, and then it's then kind of dispersed down to the individual counties and then distributed it to individual cities. So yeah, the assumption is that these areas are going to densify and build up as opposed to out.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question. If we do build multifamily homes to meet a required goal by the state, does the state have assistance for, one of the main concerns I'm hearing from people is also traffic. We don't seem to be making a lot of traction with the trestle. So setting that aside, is there money from the state to assist with the additional traffic that multifamily properties are going to create?
I could maybe have Russ speak to that. I don't think there's like a magic pot of money for specifically related to development. There is a concept of concurrency, and we do that through a variety of different mechanisms, including our traffic impact fees. Basically, that you need to show that you're basically kind of going to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, with our growth targets, basically that you're going to be able to maintain adequate levels of service. That's done through, say, a traffic impact study for larger developments. And then also is kind of one of the city's main items is either through kind of larger capital improvements. If the city has focused growth that it anticipates a number of larger projects in one area, that might be reflected within it's either a 6-year or 20-year CIP. And also at the individual level that they are required to provide traffic impact fees and to make improvements to maintain adequate levels of service. So I think we potentially would be able to explore, but I'm not familiar with any kind of just available state money specifically related to development related impacts. And I would, if Russ, if you have any addition, feel free to jump in.
Sure. Short answer is no. When we assume growth targets, there's not immediately a pot of money. However, as I mentioned earlier, the city does remain eligible for grant funding. And so we would look, and continue to look at grant funds for all of our capital projects, whether for parks, roads, or sidewalks.
So by passing this ordinance, that's the only way we're going to be able to get state funds, correct?
Well, by adopting an ordinance that approves a comprehensive plan that meets our growth targets, yeah. So it doesn't necessarily need to be in the areas that are, proposed as part of tonight. But if there are areas that are going to be removed from multifamily residential, some of the proposed rezones to multifamily residential, that it would expand that capacity, we do need to demonstrate where we'd be able to make that up in other parts of the city.
Thanks.
David, when's the last time the county approved a UGA expansion within Snohomish County?
Not in my lifetime on the council.
Yeah, Russ may be able to
Before
speak to
Suzanne
that.
Quigley was on the council.
Better than I.
That's not a thing.
I didn't hear an answer.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. They've approved, I know that they've approved minor ones. I'd have to look back. Russ may have a little bit more. He's been kind of more involved with Snohomish County tomorrow. And Russ, I don't know if you know of any kind of major ones that
That's
have
a correct assessment that they've approved minor map amendments. This year, they are proposing to expand an urban growth boundary for the southwest sort of county study area along the, I believe, Evergreen corridor. But in general, just very minor map related corrections over the years.
So, but related specifically to Lake Stevens, is there any recollection? Kim, you're getting kind of old. I don't know how long, that's 70 years.
Not just me, Marcus. And we actually go to Dr. Quigley out there because she was on before us. And we've got another
I just
council member that
I'm
had
just
done that
asking.
before
I
that.
don't know. I mean, if
We haven't had
expansion, or if we've been stuck with the same.
And there's no appetite for them to change it at all.
Okay.
There's no budget. They've said no repeatedly.
So David, did I maybe hear you correctly regarding the properties west of, I guess you call it the Cavallero area over there and it's in directly Mr. Sykes' property. Did I hear you say that today we amended or you're proposing to change that?
No, so we're not, so for which one?
This
Attachment 9.
This south of 20th, the Cavallero multifamily designation over there.
Yeah, so we're not proposing to change that. Those were comments that were provided by Mr. Seek there in attachment 9. He had provided feedback at the planning commission as well. And it was that area that it kind of spurred the additional analysis that was included in the packet, basically looking at alternatives for basically, are there other areas within the city where that needed multifamily residential capacity could be accommodated as opposed to that area west of Cavallero, west of the mixed use neighborhood area that is, proposed to maintain that mixed use neighborhood.
I misunderstood what you were talking about. I guess I would say, I mean, in particular to that area, there is no sewer, there's no water. It is adjacent to a transportation corridor, but probably will be heavily impacted with improvements to the trestle at some point in time. So I guess I would say in regards to that particular area, I'd like to see maybe a little more analysis to see what the alternatives are and kind of go back to the planning commission's recommendation here to explore alternatives and address some of the comments that have been made in particular. And I guess I'll, point out to the Quigleys. I guess I would like to see some answers in regards to that wetland issue and how we determine maybe where the boundaries are. Are we talking about some buffers or are we talking about actual wetland impacts? And kind of tighten this thing up a little bit so that we have a little more certainty, I guess, in this document. It is a lasting document. We're probably not going to touch it for another 5 or 10 years. So I guess I'd like to get some of these questions answered before we move forward.
I'm just curious, when you talk about the options, are you talking about in addition to the 3 options, which one is this? In attachment 8? Or are you saying more information about those options?
About those options, as well as, I guess, looking at this southwest corner down there that has no utilities. I mean, typically you're going to locate your multifamily where you've got some utilities in. I know that there's sewer to the property that's adjacent or to the north of there, but what kind of infrastructure would it take to get it over to across 20th and so forth to kind of serve that area? We got some topography issues to deal with there. So I guess I'd like to see some look finer tuning.
So Gary, I'm hearing 2 things, tighten up the mapping, specifically with regard to Quigley, and then consideration of alternatives to the southwest property, the 15 acres referenced.
All right, I'm confused. I'm getting old, but holy cow. You're talking about, okay, let's talk about the southwest area again, where we don't have sewer, we don't have any of that. I thought that was an option that we negated as an option. Is that not true?
That's what
Did we negate that as an option or not?
Apparently not.
No, so the planning commission's recommendation was basically they recommended the city council the map amendment that included rezoning that area to multifamily residential with the caveat that they directed staff to look at potential alternatives that would replace
Okay, now I'm
that
back.
area.
Okay, I got it.
And so, and if there are specific areas of the city, I mean, we've looked at all of the, anything that increases capacity is going to be a change from say R4, R6 or RA12 up to multifamily residential, because those R4, R6 and RA12 zones are going to assume that it's either single family or multifamily housing that's currently zoned there. We have an excess of capacity there. So we need to find areas that would rezone an existing predominantly single family residential zone to this multifamily residential zone. So if the issue is the location, we've looked at some initial areas, you know, as part of those 4 options that are included in attachment 8. If there are specific areas that the city would like us to look at, we've heard from an individual property owner, the Quarters, that, you know, would like to see it. But that area, you know, went through a sub-area planning process. It was deliberately maintained as single-family residential. So that's, you know, potentially an area, but we wouldn't do it for just one property. We would want to update our land capacity analysis, and we would need to update the noticing, you know, even if it was just that property and the property owners agreed, we're still required to provide that noticing to everyone within 300 feet. So that we would need to do that before any city council action could take place and before that could be considered. And that would go in any other part of the city where we look at accommodating that capacity in an alternative location.
One thing that strikes me about that southwest corner, though, I mean, we just have to, we're not building, we're not responsible for actually building, we're just figuring out zoning. So yeah, so I mean, all the things you mentioned, I mean, it seems like that would be an issue for anyone who wants to purchase property there when it becomes available and then try and actually build an MFR structure there, right?
Potentially. Right.
So there's no, yeah,
I mean, first off, they don't have to sell their properties.
exactly.
They can-
I mean, we could zone it, but
Exactly.
they have to sell it. They have to have the infrastructure. They have to have.
Somebody would have to want to
But I-
build that there.
I guess I would take that one step further and say, what kind of capacity have we talked about maybe for redevelopment of Frontier Village with residential? We haven't really looked at that. It's commercial. Is there, I mean, you know, we had a former council member on here that, you know, had a vision of having some residential on top of the commercial. Have we looked at that?
Yes, that's an allowed use. And again, it gets back to the market that in all of our commercial districts, they allow multifamily use. So that becomes up to the property owner to develop it to its fullest potential. So that is part of our calculation, is looking at our mixed use zones and our commercial zones to
So
at least-
we have calculated a potential for residential units in those areas. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And then we needed to add more based on, let's say, the southwest corner of Lake Stevens because we didn't have enough even with that.
Correct. We haven't seen, you know, much interest in mixed use development within our sub areas.
We're not going to
you
get
know,
we're not going to get much interest in the southwest corner of Lake Stevens either, with no sewer and other things down there. But I mean, I understand we can zone it for that. They're not going to go buying that property up and trying to, and Mr. Strike's not going to sell his property for that. So I mean, I understand that over the years, we have rezoned places for higher densities. And in a lot of those areas, that's never happened because the builders don't want to go in and tear down things and rebuild, et cetera, because it costs too much more money. But I think that looking at, like the planning commission said, I think we need to go back and look at a few more areas and see if there's anything better that we could actually plan for that might be actually attainable. Because I don't see,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't see it attainable in the next 10 years in the southwest region of Lake Stevens without sewer and stuff. And I don't think sewer districts running any sewer down there anytime soon. Is that?
Well, I think the important thing for me to remember here is what we have to attain is the zoning. We
No,
don't
I
have to
get
attain
it.
the building.
But we're planning.
Right.
I mean, I understand we could plan by zoning, but I think it also needs to be realistic. I mean, realistic to, are we actually going to be able to attain it? We don't have to attain it.
Well, in some
but we
cases,
need to be a little bit more realistic. That's just my opinion. One of 7.
I agree. In some cases, well, yeah.
Well,
So perhaps I can address a couple of the council comments on this. So as far as the analysis of other properties, David provided in the staff report some specific outlooks on a few properties, and then we had comments that were general in nature, and I can be more specific on those. We analyzed some areas up in the northwest part of the city off of Callow, off of Soper, where you may see some larger contiguous properties, but all of those properties have significant steep slope issues. And again, running into the same issues as the Southwest property, that there are limited utilities. And then you couple that with, they don't have immediate access to shopping and resources or transit. So those sort of come off the map. We looked at properties in the sort of central east side of the city and some of the newer annexed areas over by Purple Pennant. Again, you have some transportation issues there, deficiencies in roadways, critical areas, and other challenges. So we did broadly look at other areas of the city as directed by the Planning Commission. It doesn't mean we can't continue to look at these areas, but as has been discussed, this is a 20-year outlook, and there's nothing that compels anyone to make any changes to their property. It's just looking out over the 20 years with the transportation line there, potential improvements to the US 2 trestle, proximity to some retail along 20th Street, recreation resources. Again, these areas just made sense knowing that over the planning horizon, utilities will be planned and installed connecting the rest of the city. That's really why we looked at this area as opposed to some other areas, but we have given due diligence to considerable areas across the city for, sort of best fit as of today. So that's been some of the rationale. As to some of the other questions that were raised tonight, if you look at the attachment, the FAQ attachment, the city has addressed a lot of those questions about the mapping, specifically the critical areas map. It's an inventory map. It's a broad map. It is not a land use decision map. It's an indicator map that we look at to make some decisions if further analysis is done, but in no means does it control any land use decisions. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on a couple of the council member questions.
I mean, I'm looking at page 513 of 698 in our packet. It's a big packet tonight. We all have the same map and we all are looking at the same city. And we've had these conversations with our staff before. We don't have space in our city that where when we rezone, when we look at multifamily housing, we aren't going to impact neighbors, where we aren't going to impact the infrastructure concerns that we have, that aren't going to add to traffic, that aren't going to struggle with using the resources we have. We don't have those pockets of land. And so I do feel as though this is, given what we have and given all of the work that's gone into exploring different options, different areas of our city, we are mandated to increase density. We are mandated to look at multifamily zoning in our city. And this process is uncomfortable and painful. And there are always going to be neighbors that are concerned. I think we have to do the best we can with what we have. And I go back to Councilmember Donahue's comment. We're not saying we're going to go in and develop this land now. We're saying we're going to look at the areas in our city that we can possibly maybe rezone for this opportunity to exist for some developer someday. I think given all of the work that we've done, given the work that our city staff has done, given the work of the Planning Commission, I commend them for the detail that they've used. I think this is the best path forward at this point. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Do you have any other comments or questions for staff? All right, I'm going to, you guys have kind of been deliberating, but I'm going to open it up formally for deliberations. Council.
I'm not ready to adopt this tonight. I think we need to absorb the comments that the folks have made and take a step back, kind of absorb things, and we do have some time to do that so that we fully understand what we're doing here.
I would agree with that.
I guess I support the planning commission's recommendation, to consider all options. I know those have been considered. I just want to make sure that we are considering all the options. And I agree with Councilmember Daughtry that yes, we can technically approve something, but I think it needs to be meaningful and realistic and not just check the box saying, hey, we can zone this for this. Because we are going to have those requirements. And I agree with Councilman Donahue, assessment and questioning, with regard to these mandates are frustrating. To be in a position where you have to implement things that are uncomfortable and aren't they're very different than what most of us have lived here, for decades. And here we are going up instead of out. And it's hard for people to accept that, myself included.
Okay, so council's options for tonight are to approve, deny, or continue. I think we all know what approve or deny means. I would like David or Russ to explain if the council continues what the next, if the council does a motion to continue, what does that mean?
So yeah, if you were to continue, you would want to continue to a date certain. So identify a date for that and provide direction to staff on what you would like to see. If you're wanting additional analysis, are you wanting to wait until the 12th? If staff were to say identify other areas, I think we've done a pretty exhaustive search. I don't think we're magically going to find areas that would provide that zone capacity. But if we say hypothetically were to, should we begin noticing for those areas to provide an additional alternative? I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head just to maintain our schedule and to try to get this adopted in time for us to be certified by the end of the year. You don't have a meeting next week. I think you don't have one on election night. So I believe the next meeting is the 12th. And so if it were to be continued for those 3 weeks, what direction would you like to provide to staff to, task to accomplish an analysis to complete over the next 3 weeks, if you were to do that?
Okay, great. And then for my edification, Greg, we would keep the public hearing open and I would not close it. Is that correct? If they continue?
It is continued.
If there's a possibility of making amendments or additions, that would
Keep it open.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to ask the council for direction on this. Which way you want to go?
If we were, are there errors, I guess, on the maps? Because we were hearing there were errors on the map. So if we were to move forward, can it be contingent upon the maps being corrected if there are indeed errors?
So are you talking about the critical areas maps referenced by the Quigleys?
Correct.
So those were maps that were included in the Lake Stevens Industrial Center analysis. Those are not comprehensive plan maps.
Okay.
And so some of that critical areas information has been incorporated into a high level inventory map, but as Russ noted, that's not a controlling land use document. We do rely on best available science and site specific critical area studies. And we are required by the end of 2025 to update our critical areas ordinance to reflect best available science, as well as any potential changes to buffers for things like wetlands, streams. We don't anticipate any substantive changes to that, but kind of long story short on their maps. I mean, we can, if there's direction to provide updated maps, it's that document, the Lake Stevens Industrial Center was not a sub-area plan the way that the other 3 official sub-area plans are technically components of the comprehensive plan. So none of that is being proposed to be incorporated into the comp plan. And so I don't think there's any amendments that need to be made as part of this process.
So I guess I have an initial question. So regarding the capacity, so recent legislation mandated duplex on any lot, possible triplexes and fourplexes within a certain distance of a, transportation, bus stop. Do we have those exact figures for every lot in Lake Stevens that qualify for the triplex and the fourplex? And have we incorporated that into our analysis for the availability capacity that we need?
We haven't, and that's because we already had a projected surplus for both middle housing and detached single family residential. So we didn't need to do that detailed analysis as part of our land capacity analysis. And that's because we're not allowed to use duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes. We can't count that as multifamily residential capacity that's potentially affordable at or below 80% of area median income. The assumption is that middle housing, so anything other than detached single-family residential, is going to help to meet our needs at 100 to 120% of area median income. And we already have a surplus of capacity. So we didn't need to do a detailed analysis and say, well, what if every single lot develops with a duplex plus 2 ADUs? We don't get to count that capacity anyway. So it was kind of a moot point.
So it's specific to multifamily.
Correct.
I mean, this is, it's already kind of been mentioned, but I'll just kind of reiterate, having, again, the benefit of the planning commission meetings. They asked the same question, you know, what else can we do? And that's what those 3 options are. So, I mean, as I look at this, I believe David and his team have done that work and gone back and said, okay, what else could we do, you know, with the information they have? So unless we as a council have specifics that would change that, I don't know what more we would get out of asking them to go look yet again.
So Ryan, you've attended the planning commission meeting. Can you give me some insight as to the commissioners also approved a motion to request that staff explore potential alternatives to increase zone capacity for potential multifamily residential development? They must have had something in mind with that statement in.
I could do my best to guess at what they were thinking, having listened to them. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouths. You know, I believe we have one of the commissioners in the audience. I don't know if that's an option, but my perspective on it was there was citizen comment. There were a lot of concerns raised, and I think that was a response, you know, much like we're talking about now, to make sure that they had done their due diligence and that every option had been explored to, you know, find the best path forward in light of the citizen comments they received. So my guess is that is what was kind of the motivating factor there to request that David and his team go back and look at this again.
So not specific areas they're looking at, but just generally make sure we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
I mean, I think specific comments raise questions about specific areas, but the general solution was, can you go look again and make sure we're doing the best we can?
And if I could just note, I mean, one of the issues, especially with Lake Stevens and how much development has occurred over the last 10 to 15 years and the number of single family subdivisions that we've seen, is that it actually, you know, it's created a lot of smaller lots with high improved values that basically exclude it from being, you know, basically even assessed or analyzed, because it doesn't show up in the buildable lands report because the improved value is so high and the development is so recent that it basically gets screened out of the buildable lands model. And so we can't assume that those areas are going to be redeveloping if they were only built 5 or 10 years ago. That just doesn't make economic sense. And so that we've had thousands and thousands of units built over the last 2 decades. And so that basically excludes large portions of single family residential zones that could potentially, if they were older, have capacity, or if they were larger lots that were more likely to redevelop or experience infill development. But we did do some of that analysis as well. And so when you have a bunch of subdivisions with 4,000 to 6,000 square foot lots, it's not realistic to assume that that has potential capacity, even if you were to rezone them to multifamily residential.
So a few minutes ago, we said that Frontier Village was included in the analysis because we can't allow multifamily up in that area. Does that also include, does all the commercial properties on the south side of 9, or south side of 20th Street Southeast also, is that also in this calculation?
Yeah, so the land capacity analysis assumed a certain level of residential development within the commercial district, so the CD zone, as well as within the downtown area. But again, that needs to be balanced with that we need to meet our employment needs as well. So if we were to say, assume that it was going to be predominantly residential on most of the lots, that would significantly decrease our capacity of employment land. And then we'd be in the same situation with our employment projections, that we don't have enough zoned employment land to meet our employment growth targets over the next 20 years. So it's kind of a balancing act within our sub areas, because those are the areas where we do want to focus growth, but we need to balance the commercial, industrial, and residential growth within those areas. And so that was factored into the analysis.
Councilmember Donahue, you feel like the planning commission vetted this through the best they could?
I mean, I believe they did, not just them, but David's team. I mean, they heard the comments. You know, I believe they shared our feelings about this and, you know, the wish that we didn't have to go through this process the way we're having to go through it. And I think in response to that, David and his team have done a thorough analysis and given us the best option they can.
Are we ready for a motion? Any kind of motion?
I would propose that we delay this decision-making process to November 12th, is it? That
November 12th be the next meeting?
to our next meeting. And again, I fully get all the comments that have been made and so forth, but this is a big decision. It sets a trend. It doesn't set anything in place, but it does send a message. And I think we need to be very deliberate and thoughtful and confident in what we're doing here. So I don't think we can say that by adopting that tonight.
So Gary, can I get you to put that in a form of a motion plus if there's any staff follow-up you want before the 12th?
Certainly, and propose that we extend the public hearing to deliberate on November 12th. Direct staff to clarify, maybe relook to make sure that we're covering our bases. And I don't know what else to add.
Okay. Are there any specific bases you want covered? First, third, second?
No.
Okay. I'm just trying to, I want to get the staff focused on what you want them to look at, but we can run with what you've got. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second.
So to Mayor, to your point before, I guess if we're going to have a discussion, I don't feel comfortable with a vague direction for staff. I'd like to have something more specific. Because I don't think it's fair to them to have something ambiguous to try and work on and then come back on the 12th and not having had that met. So.
Okay, so I'm opening the floor to discussion on the current motion. Is there any more discussion on it? So
I would like to, does that give David and his staff enough time? If we come back on the 12th, make a decision on the 12th, does that give us enough time with the plan?
With
the comprehensive
Get it
plan
certified.
to get everything done that he needs to get done by the end of the year.
Well, if we were to identify areas, you know, potential alternatives, and they had adequate zone capacity for the multifamily residential housing that we need to show capacity for, we would either need to notice that in advance of the 12th so that it could, you know, that would have to occur basically immediately. And, you know, we need to have areas to potentially issue those notices for. We haven't, if you were wanting us to, I'm just trying to think of the best way to do this. If we pushed it out to the 12th, unless we had specific areas that you wanted us to provide the required land use noticing for, we would be coming back on the 12th. And then if as part of that, you identified an area that you'd like to replace this area off of 20th Southeast in the southwest corner of the city, and you provided that direction on the 12th, then we would need to go back out and do the noticing at that point. And then that would push it into early December, likely because you'd need a couple weeks notice in advance of that continued public hearing. And so say that happened at the first meeting in December, that would be the absolute earliest that you would be able to then take action. So it just depends on if there are specific areas that you would like us to analyze and to provide required land use noticing for, because that is a requirement for type 6 land use applications. We can't just add in land use map and zoning map amendments at the last minute without providing the required notice to the property owners.
Okay. So I have a motion and I'm second on it. Any further discussion on that motion?
Is the motion detailed enough for David's team to work on?
I would say no.
Okay.
I don't know what they're going back to you on the 12th that you don't know tonight.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think Russ wants to say something.
Russ?
No, I was just going to reiterate the point that, as mentioned by, I think, Councilmember Donahue, I don't believe at this point, without specific direction, we're going to be able to bring you back anything different than you've seen tonight.
Okay, Russ. So what I need from the council is either an amendment to the motion with something more specific on what you want to see, understanding the constraints that David just told you, or if there's no amendment, then I need you to say yea or nay to the amendment, to the motion.
At the risk of abusing discussion of the motion, I'd like to Clerk Chellan, do we have any options for scheduling another meeting between now and the 12th? I know we have 2 days there. That's not an option?
Unless you want to look at it, other than a Tuesday night.
If there isn't an opportunity or an option to bring back any additional information than what we've already seen, I'm not supportive of scheduling a special meeting to just rehash the information we already have.
I mean, I was just thinking, so I've heard this many times. I'm thinking of Gary's point where anyone who's hearing a lot of this for the first time, it would be good to digest it. I don't expect I'm going to change my mind between now and then, but I fully appreciate how much information this is. And if there's a way to accommodate that and put the burden on us giving up one of our nights to make sure David and his team have enough time, to me, that's the best solution.
May I ask council this? Is your contention just the Southwest? Is your concern the Southwest rezoning? Is that your only concern of the options put out there?
I mean, for me, with that being a recent, we got the information today that there was concerns there. And so, but I understand that was not September 15th, I think, was the most recent time when they noticed that area.
Okay, so let me ask David or Russ, can they pass this tonight, but pull the Southwest rezone off of it and to be looked at in the next plan review?
It wouldn't be compliant with the Growth Management Act, and it likely wouldn't be certified by PSRC or by Commerce if we didn't show adequate zone capacity, if we basically consistent.
All those other entities with the say.
Speaking of, do we need to table this in motion for an extension?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to get this motion.
You and me both.
Okay, and then we'll hit that one. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor.
I'd like to withdraw that motion.
I've got a second on it, so let's vote on it first. And then if it fails, then we can go back to another motion. So with that, all those in favor of the motion? And all those against the motion?
Aye.
Okay, motion fails. Let's go with another motion.
What's the format? Just move to extend the meeting by 15 minutes or how long?
No, let's keep going on this public.
Oh, okay.
And keep in mind, there's two ordinances tonight. There's
Yeah, I've got-
1188 and 1189.
Yeah, so.
I would like to make a motion to approve ordinance 1188, adopting the 2024 comprehensive plan and land use map.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to adopt the plan and second. What's the discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
So
Okay,
two opposed?
Two opposed,
Yeah, I got it.
okay. And then,
I would like to move that we pass ordinance 1189, amending the zoning map with any proposed council revisions of which there are none.
okay, so is there a second?
Second.
I'll say, okay, so I have a motion to pass ordinance 1189 and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, you got those? Okay. All right, so we are done with item 11A, and we're going to move to our next agenda. We have two more public hearings, and our city council procedures require us to make a motion to extend the time period of the meeting So can I get a motion for that?
Can we get a sense of how much longer is
Barb, can you
needed
tell us what you're
30
thinking?
We're thinking 30 minutes.
total?
I
Yeah,
would start
for
with
both.
30 and then
Start
if
with
there's
30.
questions and comments, then we would come back and do another motion.
I move to extend our meeting time 30 minutes to 8:35.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, we're going to move to 11B, 2025 Property Tax Levy Ordinance 1190. I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing for that. And Barb, you have the floor.
Okay, good evening, council and public. So I'm Barb Stevens. I'm the finance director here with the city of Lake Stevens. And tonight we have two public hearings that'll come before you. The first one is on property tax. So we are going to go over property tax limitations, the assessed value for the city of Lake Stevens and limit factors, as well as the levy for 2025. And then I'll show some comparisons of 2024 and 2025 based on the changes in assessed value and levy rates. As you all know, there's a number of limitations on property tax. There's statutory dollar rate, levy limit, which is set by the state of Washington. There's an implicit price deflator, but that only comes into play if it's less than 1%. So this year, our limit factor is the 1% increase over prior year assessed values. And our assessed values in Lake Stevens citywide averaged an increase of 8%. So that's for all properties citywide. So this is looking at our estimated levy and levy rate. So the estimated levy for 2025 is $6.6 million. This is when the assessed value goes up, as I mentioned, it went up 8%. When the assessed value goes up, the levy rate goes down. So in 2024, our levy rate was approximately 75 cents per 1,000 of assessed value. So in 2025, it's going to decrease to 71 cents. We do still allocate property tax 72% to the general fund and then 28% to the street fund. And then the table at the bottom shows the revenue increases over 2024. We're looking at approximately $64,000 as that base 1% increase. And then there's some additional new construction dollars we're receiving and then some refunds. This looks at the 2024 levy rate calculated levy by district. As you can see, the box, the blue table shows it's one of our tax code areas, and it shows the total of $8.81 per thousand. That's the amount people are taxed overall. The city of Lake Stevens portion of that is a relatively small portion, as you can see. So as I mentioned, the assessed value increase for Lake Stevens is the 8%. And then so as in the 2024 example, if the property were assessed the value of $500,000 at that 75 cents, their levy, the city portion of the levy is $376. Based on an increase of that 8%, the assessed value would be $540,000. And then the decreased levy rate would increase that annual amount for the city of Lake Stevens for $9.08 per year. So it's not a very large increase for the city of Lake Stevens portion. And this is the breakdown. And this is just a simpler way that we actually look at the change from 2024 to 2025. So as you can see, per $100,000 of increased assessed value, it increases your annual sales tax by $1.82. And so I know there aren't very many or any houses in Lake Stevens that are 100,000, but that's an easy way to calculate. If your house is 1.2 million, then you times 1.2. So as you can see, this is the tax levy rate we have talked about. The ordinance and levy assessment are in your packet. Those do need to be sent to Snohomish County by mid-November. So we have to have time to process that, council approve, and then move forward. It's not a very long presentation on property taxes. Went through it pretty quickly. If there's any questions or any public comment, This is, like I said, it's pretty basic that this year we don't have any bank capacity. The majority of the increase is going to be on new construction, and then it's only the 1% increase year over year for the city.
Okay, great. Do we have any questions for Barb?
I do. Have we received any, I didn't see any in the packet. Have we received any public comment on this?
We have not.
Okay.
Any other questions for Barb? All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor for public comments on this topic only. And we'll go digital online first. Anybody online who wishes to provide comments on this?
I don't see anybody. So again, raise your digital hand if you want to speak to the council and I can let you into the Zoom meeting. This is for the 2025 property tax levy. Nope.
Okay, and I do not have any green sheets, but I'll go ahead and open the floor for those present. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this, just this topic? Okay, seeing no one, we'll go ahead and close public comments on this portion of the hearing. Any further comments, Barb? Seeing none from you. Any questions from the council staff? Any deliberation amongst the council members? Seeing none, I would close the public hearing and ask for an action.
Make a motion to approve the property tax levy or ordinance number 1190.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to pass ordinance 1191 and a second. Is there any discussion on that?
It was 1190.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
1191.
Oh, you are correct. Stand corrected, 1190. Actually sitting. So with that, is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you on that ordinance. And we'll go to the next public hearing, which is the 2025 annual budget public hearing number 1, ordinance 1191. Barb, you are back up to bat.
Thank you very much. I need to move this closer to me, maybe. Okay, so we are looking into our budget process for the 2025 budget year. So council knows what our process is, but in case anyone in the audience doesn't, we start pretty early in the year going over our budget. We do citywide strategic planning, priority discussions with the mayor and city council, and then early August into late August, we create the base budget, request department head budget requests, compile all those into December or into September, and then that is presented to council. We start doing budget presentations to council in September and October, and then we move into public hearings. And so that is actually where we are right now. Our 2025 budget priorities align with our long-term strategic priorities. As council knows, executive staff has been working on our 6-year strategic plan. We use these draft strategic priorities when we assess the budget requests early on. So 2025 budget priorities: enhance pedestrian and traffic safety and proactively maintain our current infrastructure. So intend to increase levels of service and encourage innovative process improvement in order to do those things without costing exponentially more money. So this is just a total look at our, it's basically what's in your ordinance. It is total revenues and expenditures. Here it's grouped by fund type citywide. Different types of funds are used for different things and have different restrictions. Your general fund, legally, we're only allowed to have one general fund. So your managerial funds, your reserve fund, your permit fund, pandemic recovery, and lease funds are all included in that one general fund line item. And then we have our special revenue funds, debt service, capital projects, enterprise funds, which include the sewer and stormwater fund. And yes, we do still have a sewer fund. It is used just to, it's the source of revenue is from the district for the debt service that we have out on their behalf. So we bill them, they pay us, we pay the debt that we have on I believe at this point, it's only on the sewer plant. We used to have one on the on a lift station as well, but I think that one's paid off. So And then the internal service funds, those are the 500 funds. Those are used to accumulate funds for equipment. And then the treasurer's trust fund, I've mentioned this one in the past. These are passed through revenues. They don't actually belong to the city. Example of that would be the state portion of court fees or excise taxes. So this is a citywide breakdown of revenues by type. Taxes make up the majority at 41%. And we'll take a closer look at the taxes in our next slide. Charges for services are 15% of total revenues, and that includes your zoning and subdivision fees, impact fees like traffic mitigation and park mitigation, and your stormwater fees. Intergovernmental, those are grants and, as I mentioned earlier, state shared revenues. Other financing sources are interfund transfers and anticipated sale of property. So the interfund transfers have an in and an out. So it has a correlating expenditure with that revenue. This is that closer look at the citywide tax revenue by type, and I've also added it by funds. Property tax makes up 30% of the taxes citywide and are allocated to the general and street fund, as we just discussed during the property tax hearing. Sales tax is 43%. It includes criminal justice, affordable housing, the construction sales tax that's in the general fund, as well as the general reserve, as well as the transportation benefit funding. And then utility tax, 16% of total revenues, and it's allocated to general and street fund, and does include the solid waste. Street fund includes solid waste and the sewer utility tax. And then REIT makes up 11%, and that's all based. You can only use that on either debt or capital projects. So we're going to pivot over to the general fund, revenues by type. Budgeted revenues in the general fund are approximately 23 million in 2025. This includes all of those managerial funds, as I mentioned. Taxes are the largest source. We saw in the earlier slide that taxes make up 41% of the citywide revenues, but they actually make up 69% of the general fund. Sales tax being the largest portion at 39%. We do expect a decrease in the miscellaneous. It's at the bottom of the table for, from 2024 to 2025, and that is based on our expected decrease in interest. And then we are anticipating, just based on 2024 budget to 2024 estimated, we're currently anticipating slightly less in 2024 than about 2% than we currently budgeted, and that was based on decrease in construction-related sales tax and permits. So going back to citywide, so citywide expenditures by type for 2025 are approximately 72 million. Capital makes up the largest portion of this at 35%. And then staffing, which includes salaries and benefits, is at 33%. We do estimate 2024 expenses are going to be below budget by about $26 million. 89% of that is capital, and then 5% of that is wages and benefits. So it's based on vacancies. So about 1.3 million in salaries and wages that is under budget in 2024. The 2025 budget will be amended early in the year to roll forward remaining budgets for multi-year projects. And so the majority of that's the capital. Those roll forwards should not significantly affect the ending balances for 2025. This is looking at citywide expenditures by department. The top chart includes all operating capital and debt. So you can see the public works is at 32%. Park and Rec is 12%, general government 25%. Those three include significant amount of capital, between 40 and 60% of their totals is capital. You can see the lower chart shows wages and benefits only by department and breaks out street, storm, and facilities divisions of public works, since they're very separate things, very separate functions. As you can see, we talk about law enforcement. It makes up 17% of the total citywide expenditures, but it makes up 30% of the total wages and benefits. So significantly higher than the next closest, which is storm and surface water at 13%. This just shows that public safety is definitely high priority in the city. Looking at your general fund expenditures by department and type as well. Looking at the 2024 to 2025, increased 19%. overall from 23 to 24. So last year it increased about 14%. Looking at the cost of living increases at the bottom of the slide. So this year, the cost of living increase for the non-represented is 3.24%. That is 90% of CPIW. The Teamsters is also at 3.24%. That's within their contract. And then the Guild Commission, their contract stated a 3% increase for 2025. And then Guild non-commissioned, as council knows, they're currently in negotiations. So we will bring back a budget amendment once that is passed. As you can see, wages and benefits in the general fund make up 55% of all expenditures. Okay, these are the 2025 staffing recommendations. Looking at staffing and wages by quarter and FTE and by fund allocation. So I've highlighted those in certain colors and sorted them by reclass, new, seasonal, intern. Quarter one, reclassification promotional opportunities for several positions in several departments to promote growth within the city. Some of those are HR specialist to HR manager. The unfilled inventory control specialist is reclassifying into an assistant equipment mechanic and inventory control. Engineering tech opportunity to become a civil engineer 1. The stormwater surface water manager to an environmental programs manager to better explain what the job is that she's doing. These are budgeted in quarter one, but some may not take place immediately. It'll be up to the city administrator and the department directors to determine when that will occur. Also in quarter one.
Yes. Quick question. On those reclasses, are those front loaded? We have people already vying for those positions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Also in quarter one, we have 3 new positions, a senior accountant in finance to assist with current workload and advanced city initiatives, an assistant planner in community development to accommodate the current workload and new permit timing requirements, and a revenue development specialist in park and rec to assist with obtaining new funding sources and for programs and projects. In quarter 3, we have 2 new police officer positions. It is understood that if they're able to hire those officers sooner, they have authorization to do so. I know we've talked about that a number of times, just wanted to make mention of that. Also, there's 1 park maintenance worker and an office assistant for the park and rec department and a building supervisor in the community development department. The park and rec office assistant is needed due to the increase in park recreation and rentals. The building supervisor is necessary for the span of control in the building division and creates promotional opportunity for existing building staff. We also have 0.84 FTE. It's an equivalent of 2 positions have been added for the facility seasonals. Seasonals are budgeted based on approximately 5 months of work, which equates to 0.42 FTE each. Previously, we would have budgeted 2 positions rather than the equivalent FTE, but this change for the temporary positions actually allows the departments a bit more flexibility to hire additional temporary staff without going to a budgeted number of positions. So this is actually good when we have seasonals who only work 2 months and we know they're only going to work 2 months. We could hire another one that's only going to work 2 months and staff them when we actually need them. So this year we've also budgeted funding for 3 interns to assist with GIS data input. This is in public works and planning. So we have those. And then additionally, unlike the funded positions, we also have a placeholder in the budget for additional intern opportunities to be funded departmentally from budget savings. So if we have vacancies, that department head, if they wish, they can look at doing an intern program.
I have a quick question. The parks maintenance worker, we would wait to Q3 versus Q2 where for summertime.
I think it was one of the ones that we were holding off in order to determine what the revenues are going to look like in mid-year. Is that something that the mayor, you wanted to address?
I mentioned the parks worker.
I was talking to Gary.
And I got you. I mentioned the parks maintenance worker is Q3. Wouldn't we want that person in Q2 to have them for the summer?
Yeah, it's a valid point. You know, our discussion at retreat was we hold off on those spots until we see after Q2 what the economy looks like.
Which is fine with me. I just brought it up as a
Yeah,
summertime type deal.
yeah. And let's see how things are going in Q1 and maybe we can look at that position again for Q2.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, so this is just a look at our org chart color coded by timing. The 2025 budget includes 143.7 FTE, not including interns. You know, this is a little hard to see, so I won't go over this. This is a summary of all the non-capital projects and purchases that are being included in the 2025 budget. This list has not changed since previous presentations to council. As you see, Public Works Stormwater has the largest portion, followed by computers, IT equipment, which is software and hardware renewals and improvements. The Stormwater project includes a $668,000 grant to offset that a large portion of that CCTV program. So if that revenue was removed from that, then that wouldn't be such a large proportion of all items and departments. One other thing is when items requests that are not fulfilled in 2024 may be rolled forward into 2025. I mentioned that earlier, that if there are roll forwards and there's budget remaining, those roll forwards will occur in an amendment early in the year. Again, should not significantly affect the 2025 budget. Pivot over to street and stormwater funds before moving into capital projects. The largest portion of the street fund revenues are taxes, making up 70% of the revenue. Property tax makes up 47% of that amount, and the utility tax is 23%. Motor vehicle fuel tax and multimodal taxes are proportional shares of state imposed fuel taxes based on, we get the amount based on population. So on the expenditure side, wages and benefits are 64% of the total expenditures for the fund. Services are at 22%. That includes things like continuing the current programs like payment preservation, the annual striping, traffic calming projects, as well as some of the professional services, engineering and design type.
Barb, quick question, sewer utility tax. Have we definitely decided on that one?
I did bring that forward during the last council presentation for budget and mentioned that it was in the budget and did not hear any discussion on that.
You're hearing about it now.
Well, we talked about
Okay.
that at the retreat.
Right, and I
that's-
don't know as though we came to a conclusion. My recollection.
My recollection is that we did come to a conclusion because that's
1%,
something
2%, 3%, 4%.
that was going to be passed, that was something that the sewer district would have the option of passing on to the ratepayers, but they or they could absorb it.
It is currently in the budget as 2%.
Okay, I'm fine with it. Recollection,
It's my recollection.
that what?
We passed the 2%.
Okay, that's fine. I remember too.
And we will bring back the ordinance and all of that. And if council decides not to go in that direction, we'll remove it.
No, that's fine. I just clarification.
Perfect. Kicking and screaming.
Good question. Normally we pass it and then put it into the budget, but
Can I have a question? So the largest item of the equipment was 775,000 for the television grant. Is that covered in its entirety, or is that up?
668,000 of that is grant.
Okay. Is there a way we can put that in there to call that out specifically? Because it looks to me like that is in its entirety is covered.
Yeah, I can probably add it in there. Generally, so with grants, we have to account for the revenue as well as the full expenditure. And so that's why it looks like that, no matter which grants they are. I can add that into the presentation on that line item.
Anyone looking at it that wasn't here and hear that look and let's say, wow, we got,
Right.
may have that same question.
And I do have a note that there's a grant, but it doesn't say that it's
The
only
percentage.
I think there's less than $100,000 of local portion. So I'll add some information on that one.
Thank you.
Okay, so into the stormwater, looking at the stormwater, so storm drainage is the largest revenue source. This is based on 3% annual increase and then an additional nominal 1% for population growth estimates. So it's somewhere around 4% increase per year. The interfund transfers are quite large, but they actually they're mostly transfers between the operating fund and then the capital and debt funds. And so there's a revenue and expenditure on both sides. This year, we also have been approved for a Public Works Trust Fund loan for the 36th Street Bridge engineering and design. Once the amortization schedule is received, we'll amend the budget to include those debt service payments. On the expenditure side, it's approximately 9.9 million. Wages and benefits make up 31% of that, and then capital is at 28%. One thing a little different about stormwater is that they are self-sufficient. And so they also do include their own debt and their own capital versus street doesn't generally have those. General fund doesn't have those. Capital and debt are taken care of elsewhere. But with enterprise funds, everything is taken care of within that fund, those funds themselves. So this is a list of the CIP projects for street and parks that have been allocated funding in 2025. These have not changed since brought forward to council. The green highlights are those waiting grants and not included in the budget yet. Once those grants are received, we will bring back the revenue and expenditure budgets for amendment. Those highlighted in yellow indicate the transportation benefit program funded projects. As we mentioned previously, there are a number of other projects in here that are eligible for TBD funding, but one of those is the Main Street improvements, but we are eligible and approved for a fairly large grant, so we don't need that funding to come from TBD. That'll go towards the next projects in the list. This list includes the facilities and utilities and stormwater projects allocated funding in 2025. Again, the green highlights indicate the grant funding are pending. Total plan capital projects, approximately 25 million. 2025 proposed budget includes 7.1 million of additional project funds. So the remaining project funds will be rolled forward from 2024. Once we know how much we're actually spending in 2024, we'll roll forward the remaining into 2025. This is a summary of the capital project budget by funding source. It does add up slightly less than the 25 million due to, there's one project that we anticipate a contribution from the sewer district for the 131st project, and that has not yet been agreed upon. So that is not yet budgeted. As you can see, we have nearly $6 million in grants for various projects and continually seek out more, as Director Halverson mentioned earlier. We continue to look for those actively. And that is all I have for the first reading of the 2025 budget. Council has questions, please feel free.
Any questions for Barb? Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to public comment on just this subject at this time. So is there anyone online who wishes to provide public comment on the budget?
There is 2 people online, so I want to make sure I ask if you'd like to talk to the council about the 2025 budget. Now is your time to raise your digital hand. No.
Okay, with that, I'll open the floor to anyone in the audience who wishes to talk about the budget. All right, seeing no.
If you have any money you want to throw away.
Seeing no eager hands. We'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of this hearing. And Barb, back to you. Any additional info?
Only to Jerry at the Senior Center. Yes, the funding is allocated in 2025 as well. That's all.
Okay, so with that, any questions, comments, deliberation from the council?
I guess I got a couple comments. So one, I guess I love the fact that our bond rating is as high as it is. There's only 7 cities out of the 283 in the state that have the rating we do, which means our dollars go further. So thank you to Barb and the mayor and the staff for their work to get us to that point. That's a multi-year decision to get to that rating. So it's not just kind of a one-off thing. And I am cautious, I mean, and concerned about the state of the economy. I look at all the cities around us that are cutting positions, sometimes dozens of positions. Sales tax revenues are low, or projecting lower. And so I appreciate that the mayor and our staff are more mindful that the revenues are not as robust as they have been. We just need to be mindful of that going forward. So we got some great projects that we're continuing to fund and we're pushing through, which is why we got a big chunk of our budget is capital projects that we're finishing up.
Yep. Any other comments, deliberation, questions? Okay, hearing none. Do we need to make a motion to approve the first reading, or is that just
You need to make a motion to
I
approve the
move to
first reading.
approve first reading of budget ordinance 1191.
Okay, I've got a motion to approve the first reading and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the next time we revisit this is November 12th for the final public hearing and budget adoption.
Which is your next council meeting. No meetings until then.
Which is our next council meeting, correct? With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. No alibi.